Hey everybody, it's Chris with Life 180 and welcome to the Business with Benefits podcast. I have my beautiful wife, Mrs. American, here. So this is our first time doing a podcast like this in a while. We took our trip to Costa Rica. It was so much fun.
Amazing.
And
it's really actually kind of hard to be back.
It is. I keep telling people the hardest thing I'm dealing with in life right now is not just wanting to sell everything and move to Costa Rica.
We're holding him back.
That's my biggest battle. I just want to take all of everything I have and move to Costa Rica.
Yeah, we were there for 2 weeks almost, you guys, for our big birthdays. His was last year and mine was this year.
She turned 29 again.
29 again. 30. No, it's actually 35. I just
35
Yeah, because I want the kids.
That's your good age?
Yeah, because I want the kids. And I didn't start having kids till 30.
Fair enough.
So
we'll go with that.
Okay, so 35 forever. It was our big trip. And it was our 15th wedding anniversary.
It was.
So,
well, almost. It will be next month.
But it was the trip to celebrate.
Yeah.
Man, you're specific. Man, is he specific. What do you think you are, like
It's preemptive celebration.
Analytical.
I think we should go back to Costa Rica on our anniversary.
Just to actually do it on that day. Yeah. So it took all of that to give us the reason to get out of the house and our lives and production and business and family to escape. And it was the first trip that you and I have taken just for vacation in almost 10 years, y'all, since the first baby was born.
Yep.
So yeah, it took all of that to pull us away. So if you haven't escaped from your normal life in a while, come up with some good excuses. We flew the grandmother in to take care of the kids while we were gone, and that worked out really well. And now we're back to reality, and it just isn't the same.
We'll settle it. We'll settle it. It's all good.
Let's just say that we are now listening to rainforest music all night long.
Rainforest sounds when we're going to sleep.
YouTube rainforest sounds, so that we feel at peace like we were in Costa Rica.
It's
still not
quite the same. But anyway, So
that aside,
so Hannah and I were here working in our own offices, and she was like, "Hey, we should do a podcast and talk about the rules for fighting fair with your spouse." And I think I didn't really get into it, but I'd like to hear from you, like, why you thought this. And we've sat here. We actually have a pretty cool framework on what to do, what not to do. When fighting fair with your spouse and all that stuff. But
yeah,
talk to me.
We threw it together on the whiteboard. So if we're looking to the side, it's because we just jotted down our own notes of what our rules are for ourselves that we established. Almost 12 years ago. Almost 12 years ago.
God, we're getting old.
For not only how we want to do our relationship when it's good, but how we're going to handle the relationship when when it hits the fan, as it does, fairly regularly on most relationships. And when the disagreements happen, not if, but when they happen, what are the rules to be able to get through those disagreements, those fights, if you will, never physical, P.S., always emotional and verbal fights, disagreements. Yep. How do you get through them fairly? They're not always pretty, but we make sure that they're always fair. And here's how we do it. We hope we would share that with you for a little assistance maybe in your marriage.
Awesome. That's cool.
Yeah.
So how do you want to start this? You want to go with what not to do first?
Oh, you wanted to talk about why the idea came about.
Yeah. Well, that's what I asked you when I asked you, why are we doing this? I already asked you.
I kind of cut you off. I may have talked over you. Okay.
So talk to us about why, what inspired this? Why are we doing this?
Why today?
Yeah,
I was in the middle of writing a proposal for a project that I'm doing, trying to get a media company to sponsor me for an interview project and a book that I really want to do. And in that, I got a phone call from a friend. And you guys know that I'm in program. I do 12-step program, and it is one of the greatest joys of my life. And it's a commitment. When my phone rings and it's someone in program, I answer it, right? I do my very best to answer it. So this woman is a friend of mine in program. She had a beautiful life, fantastic job, but she was, unemployed for a little while. She has great teenage kids that she's been estranged with for a little while, and then found this guy, got engaged. He looked like the perfect dude, the perfect, man on the white horse, lots of money, comes from a family of money. And it was just sweet. He was church going, he was faith-based. They prayed into this relationship, and they really felt like they were led to be together. So very quickly, the relationship moved into being engaged. So what happens is that a couple of days ago, she had a complete emotional meltdown.
Okay.
It came about, all of these things. You know how like we can handle one thing and another thing and another thing, maybe 2 or 3 things, but when you have 4 or 5, 6 big things
And it all hits at the same time.
like
Yeah.
that's straight up collapse. And
Yep.
and not many of us can, progress through that. So she just hit collapse, and he immediately went into aggression mode, and he didn't understand her. At the same time, by the way, she was on antidepressants, and the medication, she said, has stopped about every 3 to 5 years. Her antidepressant medication stops working, and she has to switch to a different one. Why am I saying that? Why am I getting into that level of detail? Because there's a lot of people in America that are also fighting mental illness, and our mental health is woven into every single one of these conversations and every interaction that we have with our spouse. How our brain chemistry is telling us to react is a large indicator of how we're going to show up in these communications. So she's struggling with her depression. She's feeling completely overwhelmed, and all of a sudden it just melts down. So instead of him coming to her rescue and saying, "It's okay, babe, you have a safe space here, break down, cry for a few days, like life is hard. I get the transitions. You've moved recently, like go through the list of all the things with her and support her." He started to bring up, I'm gonna get mad. He started to bring up all of these things about her past that she has told him in confidence.
Okay.
Things like, and I'm not using names so I can use the story, things like she grew up on the street and was homeless for a while and was a foster kid and had major addictive issues and alcohol issues, and then got clean and sober. And she has been helping tremendous numbers of women for multiple years, over a decade now. She's like a hero in the program. And she's had this collapse, and he just went right to the jugular of who she is, which is a street rat, and she can't control herself, and she's psychotic, and he really severed the relationship and the trust there. And it broke my heart for her, because that is not how anyone sees her. And we hope that she doesn't see herself that way. And it broke my heart for him, because he obviously has either never witnessed or never absorbed or never learned the tools to have a safe fight, like to be able to be upset with someone or disappointed by someone or scared for someone, and how to handle that in a way that might be constructive. And it breaks my heart that happened, and then he locked her out of the house, and like it's a whole thing, and it didn't need to go down like that. And so I'm sitting here today just brokenhearted for both of them. I was on the phone for an hour and a half or whatever with her, and I want to be able to share. It just made me, and I shared with her what you and I kind of came up with when I imploded our relationship just before I got sober. The rules that we established for not only when it's great, but when there is a disagreement. How do we act, and how do we not act? Like, what are we not allowed to do and to say, so that we don't end up like them?
So it's not great in why but it was great that you were able to be there for her and hopefully help her and give some guidance and support and stuff like that. But I also think it's important, and I know you alluded to this a little bit, but it isn't always about a huge fight like that, right? Most of the time what we've seen, and we were talking about this a little bit before, is we've seen couples who have businesses that they try to start, and then maybe the business fails, and then that's held over the spouse's head for whatever reason, because they don't flesh through all the stuff, flesh out all the animosity or feelings and emotions that go along with a failed business or a bad investment or stuff like this. So, she used a pretty, I don't want to say extreme example.
It's an extreme
It's
example.
an extreme example, but it also happens all the time.
All the time.
Right? So it's not an abnormal example.
Yeah, and the example that you're giving of couples that for a long time hold on to resentments about things that happened way long ago, even though it was clearly one fault of one party, but that resentment was never fleshed out. And so it comes up like 20, 30, 40 years into marriages. And when the non-guilty party, if I can use that, if the non-guilty party uses that as a weapon against the other person, it's really damaging to the relationship and to the trust. And so, we always talk about creating a safe space with your spouse. And so when things are bad, you still know that you have that safe container.
Totally.
And these are the rules that help that to become a safe space. We're also going to talk about the things not to do. And that is one of them, which you're alluding to, but you're skipping ahead.
Yeah, no, I don't know.
Because you're giving an introduction.
But yeah, I
of what
mean,
might
given
be
it
happening. Yeah,
exactly,
that's cool.
like there are things that I just think at the end of the day, it starts with. I think I'd like to start this with what not to do because.
Oh, we're
I
going
think-
there.
Yeah, let's
Okay.
let's just start it because
Okay.
we are on a time frame, so we got to keep this because we do have kids to pick up and stuff. But what not to do. So let me look at this board here. So, well, first of all, I want to say this. We're not perfect. Like, I don't want, like, we're far from perfect. Like, I will tell you that. We probably fight more than the average couple in the sense that we make people around us uncomfortable a lot of times in the way that we communicate because we have these rules in place for each other. And I think it's really different because we've set up this safe space with each other where we know, well, I'm not going to say what because it'll give away some of the stuff, but because we've had these agreements, right? And because of the fact that we have these agreements, we trust each other on a level that probably most couples don't. And that trust sometimes opens up this like valve of like, you can just get after it sometimes and just like, you just like, almost like just a boxing match. And it's just like, you know how guys, sometimes dudes just like punch each other in the face and then they're high-fiving 10 minutes later? That's us.
That's us.
You know,
Because I'm more like a dude.
it's like, yeah.
Like
I mean,
anybody
in
who
a
knows
way,
me is like, you're pretty much a dude.
Pretty
Yeah,
much.
Pretty much.
And so, I mean, there's never obviously any physical, but like emotion, like, and we're always, we know we're on the same side, but it's just like, let's just, whatever we're feeling, get it out.
Get out.
And there's rules inside of that, right? Like,
You have
so,
to stay inside the ring.
right. It's just because
You know?
like, if like you're fighting MMA, you can't knee somebody when they're on the mat. Like, there's rules in place even inside of a fight.
So
and you
we
have
push
to
it
find that.
right up to the line.
Well, you push it more than I do.
Shut
fairly.
up
Fair-
when
fair.
you're talking to me. But we don't go over the line. So, okay. So without further ado, let's jump into these rules, shall we?
Okay, rule number 1
Okay.
is you can't bring up the past to hurt. Talk to me about that one.
You can't bring up the past to her. Well, this is how you started in the introduction.
Okay.
So the past might be, I mean, let's go for the big one. It might be an adultery situation. It might be, let's see, what do people do? It might be a gambling issue. It might be
Yep.
when you lost a lot of money in a business that you started and it failed, or you lost a lot of money repeatedly.
So you can't
in
use the
businesses.
past failures or mistakes or whatever as ammunition in an argument.
To cut that
essentially,
person
is what-
down.
To cut that person
Right,
down.
for whatever
And
that is. If it's business, if it's personal, it doesn't matter. You can't use that to hurt them, to cut them, to beat them up in
Mm-hmm.
an argument. You just can't do it. That has to be worked out. It's not to never talk about those things
Right.
also, but that issue, if you feel the resentment, if you feel
Mm.
animosity about that issue, we always recommend going to see a therapist.
Totally.
Like, y'all, it's like having your tires changed on your car every 3,000 miles. Or is that the oil? The oil. Every 3,000 miles, you're supposed to go change the oil, right?
Tires are like 30,000.
Oh, all right, whatever. So,
It
or
works.
3,000 to 5,000 miles, I think
Sure.
is the oil. Anyway, so we changed the oil in our car. We should get, touch-ups. What do we call them? Tune-ups in our marriage.
Tune-ups.
Tune-ups looks like going to a therapist, and if there is a major resentment that you feel you want to bring up in a fight, I think that's a really good flag to be like, oh, I guess we need to go work this out.
Well-
And in a safe space, talk it out, get through it. Don't bottle it in, but don't bring it up in a fight about something unrelated.
So, I mean, this happens, everything, but everybody knows our story to a certain level. And,
they don't.
well, I think a lot of people watching this know our story. But I would say this is, if you don't know our story, go watch our previous videos. But the,
Yes.
but here's the thing. Like, a lot of people, when we went through our stuff, like, asked me, like, how can you just forgive her? How can you this and that? Like, how do you not hold it over her head? It's like, I just kind of say, and we worked through this at the very beginning. And is it always easy for me? No. Like, are there times when it hits me mentally, emotionally? Sure. But like she said, I'm never going to, if it comes up, I try to bring it up in a moment where we're in a good space.
Right.
And I try to do so from a place of vulnerability, I guess, like from a place of like caring about the relationship, and from a place of, not attacking in any way. It's not like there's no what's the
I don't
aggression.
know.
There's no aggression. There's no aggression
It's
to it.
vulnerability,
I was thinking
not aggression.
aggro.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like, so there's no aggression to anything that I'm like trying to like bring across or any point I'm trying to talk about in that moment. And so when I made the decision to forgive and when we decided to like come together, I made the agreement and with her that I was never going to do this. I was never going to, and it's not always easy in every moment, but like there's certain lines. This is like the rule. You don't kick somebody when they're down. Like you cannot bring this into the fight, because if you do, like if you cross that line, it will blow up in your face. And listen, the most important thing that your marriage has is trust and the agreements that you have with each other, and you have to honor that. And as soon as you take that thing that, you know, whether it's the failed business, you know, like, I mean, I've had plenty of failed businesses. Let's flip it on me for a second. Like, I've had plenty of failures in business and investments, right?
Yeah, we're going to take the halo off you.
Let's flip it on me for a second.
Yeah.
There are plenty of situations where I've lost plenty of money. I've had a failed business. I've made mistakes, you know, with that stuff.
Bad investments.
That's just the way it goes. Bad partnership, like
Bad
whatever.
partnerships. Yeah, you
like
name it.
there are plenty of things that, you know, since we've rekindled, in the last 12 years, that she could look at me and be like, "You're an idiot," like you're, you know, like whatever. But at the end of the day, you know, we're not allowed to hold the past, you know, against the other person in the argument for what's going on right now.
In the moment.
You have to deal with what's in the moment. So
Yeah.
I think we got that one good.
All right, I think
Right?
we nailed it.
All right,
Yep.
number 2, using things that they've told you in confidence to hurt them. So this can be an extension of number 1 in a way, or it can be completely independent, you know, in the sense that in trusting your spouse, you want to be vulnerable, you want to be real, you want to be completely open with them, like especially in new relationships, right? You're getting to know each other. It's that we've all seen movies, we've all watched things where like people are very standoffish. Like we're watching This Is Us right now, right? Like,
Has everybody seen it?
If you haven't seen This Is Us, you should watch it. It's actually a fantastic show. I kind of like protested it for years, and then we started watching it. I'm like, oh my gosh, I see why everybody loves this show. But
We watch one show together. We're not huge TV people, as
Yeah.
you know. We're either reading a book or we're going to watch one show together at night if we just need business like out of our brains. And so we pick one, we snuggle up, and we watch it together, so that then we can talk about what we're seeing and
Yep.
doing and experiencing together. So I know not everybody has, you know, the ability to do that with spouses having different preferences, but it's really awesome and it works for us. So, but in This Is Us,
But-
there's that example.
that example of not opening up. So there's an actually example of both, where they open up to each other and they have that support and the love and the trust. But there's also elements actually in the episodes we just watched where they withhold big portions of their life, right? And people watch, you know, spouses not open up and not talk to their spouse and not share deep things that are really important and really heavy in their own life and in their own heart and emotionally. And we're all watching and we're like, why would you not share that? But that happens every day in life, in marriage, and we all look at it from the outside looking in and we go, why would they not just share? Well, the reason is because they're worried it's going to be held against them.
Because people haven't learned to create a safe space, and they
Yeah.
don't know what those rules are, because those rules
Yeah.
have not been consciously created.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, they've probably had someone fight and do these rules of what not to do
And
in the
leverage it.
past and
Yep.
leverage it against them and hurt them with that information.
And
So
it's-
that info might be something like, in this case, it was, you know, an upbringing or pains or abuse or neglect or painful things that have happened to you in your past that you weren't responsible for. I think that might
Yeah.
be the difference between 1 and 2.
Yeah.
You can't bring up the past of failings to hurt the other person is 1, and 2, no using things that they've told you in confidence to hurt them. So things that maybe have happened to them in the past,
Yep.
because that just undermines the trust, and it is really hard to get that back. So that's number 2.
That is number 2. So number 3, you named this one.
I did.
It's interesting. The weapons of choice have to be put down.
I named all
So
of these,
I know you did. Well, kind of. Yeah, sure.
and then you added to them.
Yes. Weapons of choice. So talk to me about like what are weapons in an argument?
Yeah.
And
so-
we're not talking like physical weapons,
We're not
because that's
talking-
obviously never condoned.
Right. And that isn't how we roll. But so the weapons of choice, when we're going into a fight, right? I mean, this isn't just like a little disagreement. If we're going into a fight, everyone has their own weapon, their own personal self-defense and aggression. And so, for instance, I was talking about, in the example that I gave that inspired me to share this today, this guy that she had become involved with comes from a family of great wealth. And so he became really controlling over her. He wanted a woman to be there in his life all the time and be super present and at every event. And he started to just consume her. And she lost all of these different aspects of who she was and started one by one to let go of things that created her as the person that he fell in love with, right? And then all of a sudden he, ate all of those things up and doesn't know why it's a mess. But so he's controlling on her, and he's using the money, the power as a weapon to hold her down and to manipulate and to not manipulate, but to aggressively like push her down. And that's a weapon in a fight, It's like the weight weapon. If you're bigger and stronger and wealthier.
So it's like demeaning.
Yeah.
It's like you demean the other person. Like, so if the weapon of choice is like to control and demean and manipulate.
I make more money than you, so I make the rules. Let me give you that example. Or you were a stay-at-home spouse for 15 years, so you don't get a say in this.
You're nothing without me.
You're nothing without me, and you couldn't have done this without me, and I'm the one who held this all together. And that's a weapon, y'all. That's a weapon of control.
That's abuse. I mean,
and
there's no mistake. That's verbal abuse.
It's verbal abuse.
No way around it.
Because you're diminishing that other person. Yep. And so that was the weapon that he used. And unfortunately, you see a lot of people in relationships, particularly men, I'll pick on the guys, or anyone that's the primary breadwinner. They have used that for way too long. And it is, maybe you don't realize how abusive and how harmful that is. You're diminishing the other person and making them feel less than. They're never going to rise to be the person that you fell in love with way back when if you've diminished them. You need to build them up and let them know, how thankful you are that they engaged your household and raised your children and supported you for 15 years. How thankful you are that you're able to financially help them because you love them and they're worth helping, and build them up with that the assets that you have.
I think that's important because, like, think about this. If you go into a fight and you are the person, you're the breadwinner, and there may be elements of like, listen, if what you're saying, if that statement, let's just use the statement, you're nothing without me, like I make all the money, you're nothing without me, you make no money, you've never provided, I've given you everything. There are plenty of relationships out there like that, right? But think about it. Like, if I'm just that's not the case in our relationship, but let's just say it were, just from a role-playing perspective. If I were the breadwinner and Hannah were not, internally, if you're not making any, you're not providing, and like you're staying home with the kids, you're doing what you're doing, you're gonna naturally feel more dependent, right, than you're comfortable with anyway. So you're naturally already like questioning your own worth and like all that stuff in that scenario, anybody who's in that scenario. So as a husband, it's my job to make sure that she's lifted up, that any of those emotions that she's having in regards to that are squashed, that she realizes the value that she actually brings to the table. And so when you bring this cutting down to the table and the control and the power play and the manipulation and kind of demean your spouse on whatever side, if you're on the production side of the equation, so to speak, if you do that, once again, we started with trust is the most important thing. Like, your spouse is never, that is the fastest way to lose your spouse emotionally, because like, it has to be a team game. It has to be a team game. And as soon as the spouse that is providing a ton of value in where they come from and what they're doing for your family, for your kids and all that stuff, because make the person who's out there providing, if it is that way, chances are they're not able to do and take care of and be present and support the kids and the family and the household and all that stuff. Like, it takes both, and and there's no more value on one side of the street than the other. I don't care who you are. I will die on that hill. As soon as you go there though, and you blow that up and you cut the other person down, you lost them. I mean, that is, in my opinion, that is one of the fastest ways to divorce and to losing your spouse and losing that trust, because they're going to become emotionally disconnected from you.
Yeah, I was thinking distant. And then don't wonder why when you come to her looking for what you're looking for on a regular basis, by the way.
What do you mean?
This is an adult show, but I still don't need to specify. you can't be surprised when she's like, I'm not interested. Because you've offended at the deepest level, and that's a weapon. You've really, really, really cut deep into her core of self-esteem and self-worth.
Yeah.
That person is not going to put out for you. I'm sorry, under any circumstance. So I'm just going to lay that on the table because I'm a
Fair
dude
enough.
and I put things on the table like that. So anyway, that's just one weapon as
Yep.
an example.
Yep.
The other weapon that I thought of as an example is actually the one that I used. And is my natural tendency. So I'm consistently fighting against it. That weapon is my tongue. That weapon is the verbal cutting that I can naturally do if I don't filter myself, if I don't think about things first. And it actually even happens when I'm not in a fight. You know, I could have the same thought, but I could say it in a way that's cutting and demeaning. And which also is cutting and demeaning to her, by the way, because now I'm insulting you for being married to, you know, like, and so that was just a hot mess. Even though I was being honest, I wasn't being kind. I was being honest and true to what I believed in that moment, but it wasn't kind. So I shouldn't have said it. And I shouldn't have said it in the way that I said it. So my tongue naturally causes mayhem.
Cutting is never constructive.
It's never constructive. And so then I rephrased it and it was all good. But I have to now, I can't always stop it, but I can correct it easier and I can apologize easier. And now we laugh about it instead. But so I always used to do that. Like before I got into recovery, before we separated and then came back together, I cut you at the knees, like the knife essentially. So, you know, we talked about bringing in the control as the weapon and the weight of money essentially as the weapon. Well, my tongue is a knife and that was my weapon. And as long as I could just slice you up and demean you about all of your failures and all that you're not enough.
Death by 1,000 cuts.
Death by 1,000 cuts.
Yep.
And then I shrunk you to like this big. Then I felt like I was empowered and I won. And
the crazy part about that is like
it was ugly.
At that point in time, before, you know, when we were in our 20s, when this was really happening in our relationship, I know like her objective was for me to be the biggest, best self I could be. What she didn't realize is what she was doing by making all these little cuts was just demeaning me, making me feel less than, and was accomplishing the exact opposite of what she was hoping to accomplish.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's just, you know, just think about what is the intention of where you want to go and what is the result going to be from what your action is. And cutting people down typically is never going to get you where you want to go, you know. So let's get into
even if they're little slices.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I don't know what your weapon is. Everybody brings, there's a whole slew of them. What you're
Yeah.
bringing into an argument, but hopefully this will give you a little introspection. You know, maybe even talk about it with your spouse. Like, what do you bring into an argument? What do I bring
Yeah.
into an argument to try to win, right? But the goal of this is not to kill your opponent, y'all.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
to injure your opponent. And I think that's the basic premise of the fight that most people think, like, you know, and I thought early on, is to injure the opponent so that I can be victorious. That's not the case. You want to come up with a win-win so that you are both walking out like
Yeah.
with a constructive resolution to this.
Yeah.
So talk about what your weapons are. Think about
Love
what your
it.
weapons are and how you're going to put them down and how you're going to fight nice.
Love it. So I'm going to audible on this because, so I'm looking at the timer. We're almost a half hour into this.
Okay.
So we're going to do a 2-part video series on this one because, so we just got through what not to do.
What not to do.
So what we're going to do is, if you're watching this right now, look tomorrow, make sure you look down, hit the like button if you found value in this, share this with people because I think it's really important. There's couples, marriages, relationships all over the place that need to understand this stuff. Like I said, we're not perfect, but these are rules that we use to, you know, keep our relationship happy, healthy, all that stuff, and just, I think, thriving. I think we have a pretty good relationship. But so hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. That way you get notified because we are going to release part 2 to this video tomorrow. We talked about what not to do in this one. We're going to talk tomorrow about the 5 things to do to have a constructive, fair fight with your spouse. If that's really a thing.
Happy
but
fighting.
We'll talk about the 5 rules about how to have, you know, there's never a good fight, but to at least not let it blow up your relationship, not let it, you know, get out of control. So I think that'll be good. So until tomorrow, have a blessed, inspirational day, and we'll see you there.